So, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You see, if you stick till the end of this video, you will get some benefit from hearing what is being said. So, when it comes to experiencing such a so-called high state in scriptures or culture or whatnot you want to call it, it is not something that can be conveyed to you on the level of the mind. You see, when one experiences such a state, and I'm talking from experience, when one experiences such a state, there is no words that can be conveyed. The only thing that which can actually be spoken of is kind of futile to some extent. But nevertheless, it does have value because, you see, if it wasn't for the people of the past who have come, who haven't spoken of anything, then me coming into contact with certain type of wisdom to progress on the path, or what you call as a spiritual path, would have not been that efficient. So in that context, I speak of such a thing. So, you cannot attain Nirvikalpa Samadhi. If you are wondering how do I attain it, you are already going in not in the wrong direction, but you're going down something called a long path where you may never reach. And I said may. I'm not discarding the fact that it's not possible. It is possible, but the question is, how determined are you? Are you willing to die to find out? What are you prepared to do? You see, it's also not something that you have to do to experience. It's not something that one has to do all of these different types of things. Like in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they speak of the 8 limbs of yoga. You see, it all has a benefit to some extent. It can benefit you in heading in that direction. But you see, when I experienced such a state, I was not running after it. I didn't care about it. The only thing I cared about was doing something called sadhana, which is a spiritual practice, and unknowingly and unconsciously, if you want to use those specific words, I was practicing the 8 limbs of yoga unknowingly. Now, when I'm saying unknowingly, I'm saying not knowing that it was part of the 8 limbs. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to do all the 8 limbs to get there. There's no such thing. You see, spirituality, right, is a paradox in its nature. When you expect something, nothing happens. When you don't expect anything, as a result, that happens. So in this culture, on the spiritual journey which I was following, there was a sense of wanting to attain something called liberation, being free. Through the journey, it never occurs to you, being free from what? You see, the paradox is you are everything. So what are you trying to be free from? You see, all I was interested is exploring death. And you see, the biggest, the most powerful person that I have come across through my spiritual journey specifically was a video found on YouTube by J.D. Krishnamurti. Now, his approach doesn't talk about all of these things, you see, but I've used, if you want to call it a method. You see, he tells you it's not a method, but those specific words that were used in order to see and find out what it is. You see, the only question I cared about was, what happens to me when I die? You see, anyway, it's going to happen. But in order for a person to not know they're going to die, they need to understand that they're going to die. When I say know, I'm not talking about knowing that, yes, one day you will die. Not that kind of a knowing. You got to understand your mortal nature here on this planet, this limited time that you have here. You see, when you understand this limited time, time doesn't exist. That's the other thing. But from your perspective, if you want to experience something beyond, you need to work from there. You can't take a shortcut. There's no point in me telling you something and then you can just jump around and take a shortcut. Because there's a certain thing in a human being that has to exhaust itself out. You have to work at this spiritual awakening, or whatever you want to call it, like your life depends on it, like you're willing to die for it. Now you see, prior to this, I used to do 6 hours of meditation every single day. Now cumulative, not directly sitting 1 hour, one straight 6-hour stretch. Cumulative. It was spaced out, 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon. But this 3 hours was not dedicated to finding death, finding out what happens to when I die. You see, what happened to me was, in 1 week, I searched for this thing. And I searched for this thing because I wanted to know. You see, someone can tell you what happens after death. That doesn't solve the problem. You need to find out. If you want to find out what happens to die, you need to die now, not tomorrow. You need to find out now what is going to happen to me now. Death is now. It's not tomorrow. It happens in this moment. So you have to have that kind of dedication. You have to understand that I, as an individual, am going to die, and I don't know a goddamn thing about what's going to happen. I can believe what's going to happen, but I will never know the truth until I die and I experience it for myself. Now, when that happens, when that sinks in, your mortal nature sinks in within yourself as the limited amount of time that you have here and you're not going to know. That is the type of intensity that one needs to find out what happens. You see, through that constant seeking. Now, this was seeking on an insane level. Every second, not wasting a second, because death can come at any moment. Do you understand the circumstance and environment that I am painting for you? Do you see the seriousness of what I am saying? You see, forget about these things called past lives and all this stuff. Whether past lives exist or don't exist, or whether you've been on a spiritual path or you haven't been on a spiritual path in a past life, has no significance. What you do now is important. It may have some influence to some degree, but that was not the ingredient. The ingredient was understanding the mortal nature of the human being, that I'm going to die and I need to find out what happens. Because everything that you gather from this point till the end means absolutely nothing. Because anyway, at the end, you're going to die. So what is it? This is something that you need to find out what happens. What am I? Not worrying about liberation, enlightenment, and samadhi and all this nonsense. These are all just words floating around. And not thinking that because I told you that if you go like this, as a byproduct or as a consequence, an experience like this can happen to you in this lifetime. You can't fool yourself. When it comes to spirituality, you can't lie to yourself. You have to be authentic. You have to be honest to yourself. You have to be true. You can lie to the world, but you can't lie to yourself. Because if you deceive yourself, you're the biggest fool. So, once you understand the seriousness, the nature of the mortality of who I am, then nothing in this world can deny you from finding out that. But you have to make that effort. You have to put in the foot forward. One way you can start by realizing that you don't know, because that's the first step. You see, when you look at a tree, or if you look at this wall behind me, it doesn't tell you a goddamn thing about it. You have information and you have knowledge which you have picked up from others outside of yourself, which people have told you, this is what a wall is, that is what a tree is. You don't know what the damn thing is. These are all descriptions. They didn't know what it is. They asked other people. Other people told them they didn't know as well, because everyone learned from the other person. And you can go all the way back. And when you do go all the way back, someone made it up. So again, it's a belief. So what is it? You see? We don't know any goddamn thing, but we still continue to move in life. Now, when you bring yourself to that state of I don't know, your mind, this is how you know. Your mind comes to a state where it cannot move or it cannot shift out of whatever that object is that you are looking at. It becomes impossible for your mind to move, because your mind cannot process, cannot function, because it doesn't know what that goddamn thing really is. If you bring yourself to that state there, what I am talking about, now you take that and you apply it to the whole entire existence, including yourself. Then you don't worry about what happens next. You just find out for yourself.